The topic we're going to discuss today is modern farming. It's back on. Modern farming. So, I first wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that this is Lummi and Nooksack land that we're on. And I want to talk about the history of agriculture and how that's tied to our social infrastructure. Throughout history, there was much simpler social hierarchical systems. So it would be like an egalitarian system to where when someone collects food, it's shared with everyone, and you're expected to do that. That's how you place yourself in that ranking. So of whatever community you're a part of. And then as we developed as a species and were able to control and keep those resources, that energy input that is food, our social systems became more and more complex. So we've moved from small, and there's still factions of people around the world that practice egalitarian foraging and much more basic social systems with much more basic farming like horticulture or hunting and gathering. So now we're at this point where we are at intensive agriculture and we have an extremely complex social system that's very deeply intertwined with the way that we grow our food and the way that we get our food. So when I was researching this last night, I was running into these walls of like, there is so much we can talk about. And I was thinking of giving a lecture, like this part of agriculture is bad and this part of agriculture is good, but to say that is totally subjective to someone's experience. And this goes back to how we are so closely intertwined with the way that we produce our food. So I wanted to open up with a question, and you can make this a journal entry or just ponder it for about 5 minutes. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of modern agriculture and what your relationship to food is? So is there anything what immediately came to mind when I asked that question? What do you think of when you think of modern agriculture? Does anyone have any ideas that they want to shout out? Johnny?
Like cash crops, large scale culture.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Industrialization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just the disconnect between people and where their food comes from.
Yeah.
I wrote about it can be a form of oppression, taking the power away from the people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I guess I kind of strayed the other way. I was thinking of the new things that are arising because of monoculture, like permaculture, horticulture, urban farming. I was thinking of that as more of modern things.
Yeah, and that is. So I think when I was looking at this, I saw we do have all these amazing new technologies of permaculture and vertical farming, aquacultures, hydroponic systems. And then we also have monocrops and genetically modified organics and these large corporations that have totally monopolized soybeans or corn or whatever you call it. And then the huge injustices inflicted upon migrant laborers and farm workers. And then the next thing that I was thinking about was food availability and what socioeconomic status you have and how that affects what food you can buy and what you might label as good or bad agriculture. And I understand there's some definitive things that are bad, such as injustices upon farm workers. But when I'm thinking more of a GMO versus an organic farm, if they're both done in an ethical way. I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on how that perception changes depending on your socioeconomic status of what is good farming and what is bad farming.
I always notice how I'm so drawn to organic food and making sure that everything is natural and simple, and then I have to always remind myself that that's a privilege, that I have access to that kind of thing, and that for a lot of people in this country, especially when you get into places where people are stuck in food deserts, where their closest access to food is hundreds of miles away, and what they have is not even fresh produce, you know, and it's, at that point, if it would take a less organic, hippy-dippy agricultural system to give them food access, you'd have to really question what's ethical in that point.
And that's a symptom of capitalism, right? Yeah. So this is all part of this large thing that we're operating under, capitalism. So, and I apologize for being redundant here, but my mind was wandering, and I was thinking about, so we're losing farmland. Urban sprawl is rampant. But we also have these really large monocrops, and a lot of people think, oh, there's plenty of farmland. But then we also have a lot of these cool movements like urban agriculture, somewhere like the Outback Farm, where I know a lot of people in Bellingham are growing in their backyards. I've done some research on green roofs and people growing in the city. And these amazing like permaculture and vertical farms. And so another question I wanted to prompt you guys with is like, where do we go from here? How do we change our food system to where it is both environmentally friendly, economically viable, and sustainable? And like, what are your ideas? Because there's a lot of ways we could go about it. There are arguments that GMO crops and these huge technologies we're using are actually going to do better for the environment, and using seeds that require less water, using technologies that monitor the status of a plant so they can selectively put fertilizer out. And there's people who argue for that side and then the other side. So where do you guys think, and you can make this a journal entry if you'd like, or we can just start shouting out and getting some ideas going. Where do we go from here?
Maybe like those things, economically viable.
How do you make it environmentally friendly, economically viable, available, accessible? Oh. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, actually, thank you, because I was going to divide you guys into groups. Yeah, so if you guys want to pair off in like groups of 3, 2 or 3, 4 if you need to, and discuss where you think our best route is to go. But yeah, economically viable, accessible, environmentally friendly, and sustainable, which you could say sustainable, it is all that. But.
All the way down. So if I take just try and bug or whatever and put it into this organization, just do whatever. If I then eat that,
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't digest.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. We have one thought. Yes.
And like different social structures, depending on how they have been, like their history, they can either benefit greatly from GMOs, or they can shut it down based on, so like McDonald's was using a genetically modified potato. It was called New Leaf, and the only thing that they had done to make it like perform better or whatever was they had taken this gene from a bug, and they put it into the potato, and if this like huge potato pest would come in, if it bit the leaf, it would like implode or explode from the inside. Yeah, it's like stomach would explode.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that was a natural occurring thing found in a bug.
Yeah.
So they had this potato, and potato farmers were doing really well. It did promote monoculture, which is not great. I'm against monoculture. But monoculture was happening anyway, especially in Idaho with McDonald's and big chain buyers. So when the population found out that McDonald's was using this GMO potato, they didn't hear anything about the benefits. They just were like, oh, GMOs, we don't want that.
Bad, get it out of here.
Yeah, cancel. So that product, people began to boycott McDonald's. So that product is called a newly potato. That product became nobody was buying it anymore, so they basically threw it away. They're like,
We all joke about it.
Go now.
We all joke about it, but
It's
like
not
a plague would
economically
definitely just like help us.
viable for us anymore.
Clean
so
Australia, just
we're just not going to.
Why Australia?
On the
Hunger
other side
Games
of the
on Australia.
Asia, an area where rice is like a huge staple. White rice historically had been for like more affluent.
That's some really morbid stuff.
The white rice, like,
Wow, I like
well known white
imagine
rice
that
tastes
one,
better than like brown rice.
two people from China and India.
Like a comfort
They got a
food.
lot right
So they
there.
developed this golden rice.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
that
a
was
good.
a GMO
I'm writing that
product
down. That's a book
that
idea.
the people of that community.
Well, like on a
said,
modern
"No,
scale.
thanks."
So I'm gonna write this. Oh, I can already.
Brown rice has a lot more nutrients in it, and one of that has to do with your eyesight, vitamin B or
Dogness.
one of the vitamin B's.
Dogness ever.
So a lot of that community was becoming blind.
Okay, so
Diet related, they pointed to the rice. So they're like, okay, now that the economy has lifted and everyone can afford white rice because it tastes better and it's like, oh, I want to be fancy and have the white rice. They were losing out on a lot of those nutrients. That was their prime source of getting that nutrient from. So blindness was affecting a lot of the population. So they introduced this golden rice, which apparently like had the taste of white rice, like it didn't taste, just like the nutrients of the brown rice, and the vitamin that they were inserting back into it.
and it's
is-
like
it's a carotene. If you remember, were you there for my biochromium lesson? It's like one of the natural colors. It shows up as yellow and orange. Like carrots have a lot of it. So that's where the golden color came from. But they were still like, I don't understand this item, and while it might be good for me, I'm still nervous about the repercussions, negative repercussions. So it also is kind of,
There's a lot of emotions associated with GMOs.
Of the farms by like Tyson and stuff. Like Tyson was like, I remember class was like 305 and we did a discussion about like factory farms and stuff like this. And I felt like shit, I just didn't want to talk in the discussion. But like there's so much right beside me, just people were like, oh yeah, like I was actually surprised when I saw that like 90% of those farms are
And GMOs were like more widely
all you need to do is find a family farm that has like a farm
but like since there is a monopoly in
that's a
the
family
sense
farm.
of
Like, that's all you need.
synergy,
It could be
synergy.
Tyson owns so many factories, like so many family farms, and they're trying to equally factory
Companies.
It's like so like
Possibly
it's like the weight of everything. Like, I do
Terrible. Oh, it makes me so mad.
feel like a
What'd
lot
you-
of
and
times trying to paint a picture
they
of them
put
being
the
like
patents
those
on the
dairy farms.
seeds. So it's like if your product produces seeds and you use those seeds again, they can sue you.
And then in reality, you know, like
Farmer
go
uses
down
their
south
seeds
and
and the
something like
wind
that,
carries
and
it to another farmer who
Cross-pollination.
doesn't. They can sue that farmer.
shit like that. And it makes sense because they
And
have
it's like, it's
because
kind
they're
of
like,
like,
okay,
how
like
dare
we
you
need this much
put
stuff
a patent
from
on
you, or we're gonna dump you because there's like another farm just up
So how do we
the street that
combat
go to
that?
get the same amount of stuff.
Where's
So,
the
like,
change? Like,
and
where?
then,
What's
like,
the
the pressures
catalyst
on
that
them too, like,
changes?
They can't talk about it at all.
I know it's a huge question, but like, there's a lot of like really cool
No, yeah.
ways that can happen.
And we were talking earlier, I mentioned my lesson for Susha connects with this in a big way. So I don't know if we can collab on anything or whatever, but
Super down.
I have been trying to do
But it's
no
like,
victory
there's
gardens
just
from like
so
World War
much
eras.
resources.
I recognize it, but I don't know.
So they were rationing basically everything. So they encouraged and educated the people on how to grow your own food at home, and they called it a victory garden. So like help us to victory by supporting your troops and grow your own food. So just the knowledge of where your food comes from, how to grow it, you can choose if you want to use a GMO product or not, or you can go heirloom style, you know.
Yeah.
When you think about
Just
it,
giving that knowledge back to the people to have them control what they do, I think.
Waste of food and the use of resources for different things, and just like the amount of resources used in
as a vegan, I'll preach about just like the dairy industry and the, you know, factory farming with the meat industry and stuff like that. Like, I remember I had to do some paper, and it's like in '97, if all the animal feed used for dairy and meat animals was reallocated to humans, it could feed 400 million people. And then that was in '97, so it's like today crazy. And just like how much water is used, and how much energy, we just talk about the total energy used to make the feed for animals, and then, you know, all the energy needed to make, like, you know, the meat and get that out there, and just the inefficiency of that and how that kind of affects the cost of things and just how we view like limited resources of land and water and foods is kind of like the big effect of it. Just like too much waste and a bad allocation of resources right now in our system of like factory farming. Yeah, that's kind of what we talk about. I know a few other things. But
on that note, the most recent number I heard was 2015 that with all the grain and everything, we currently have enough food to feed 11 billion people.
Yeah, wow, that is way more than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Wow, that.
Yeah, we also talked about waste on all levels, because I was telling him about how I worked on an organic farm, and like the yield of an organic farm is way less than like a monocrop. But I remember going into like our cold room where we kept all our food, and there would be buckets of apples that have gone bad, like piles of rhubarb that is starting to rot, and like so much of that was wasted. And we like sold a lot at the farmers markets, we sold to restaurants, and then there was like processing for winter, so like jams and things. But like wasting on all levels, starting with like the farming, like there needs to be a better way to not waste food on that level. And then we were talking about like grocery stores. So many grocery stores waste food because things aren't pretty enough. Oh yeah, and on top of that, we couldn't sell things that were like bruised or looked bad or like had little marks on them. And then like consumers, wasting food as consumers is like really big. So avoiding waste on all levels, I think.
Yeah. We also talked about recycling and how it was mainly us ranting about like even just like the little things you can, like people's roommates throwing it in the trash instead, or the hotel, was it hotel you used to work at, Maria?
Yeah, I worked at a resort.
Yeah, they like
tricked people.
They told the customers or people sleeping there. I can't think of the term right now. That they recycled and then they actually threw it in the trash. So like, even just like the systems we have in place right now, people not fully utilizing it is also a poor allocation of like human energy, almost. I don't know.
I did some.
I was just gonna go off that. I've worked in like Safe Food before in their produce department. It's discussing how much food you waste, and they put them in compost bins, but even then, no one knows what composting is, so it's filled with plastic and wrappers and containers and stuff. And then, yeah, it's pretty bad. And they also, Safeway doesn't recycle or compost or anything. They have multiple bins for it, but all goes in a trash compactor. So it's just like that kind of, we're green, but we're not.
Arizona literally has everything put into one bin, and they say that they like separate if it's one bin. There's no way.
There's tons of cities that don't even recycle, or you have to take recycling to the recycling plant, and that's just like a whole nother issue with who has access to driving like 25 miles to the recycling plant and then paying for your recycling. Like,
yeah, it's definitely a privilege having like structured and recycling systems like being put in place, and just that availability of it. Like I remember in elementary school when we got our recycling system like put together, and it was like, oh cool, we got this. And then like just thinking of like places that just doesn't have that, it just seems weird and foreign to me. Like not just having a blue bin in every classroom to throw stuff in. Yeah.
I think it's really important to look at the whole system and like who has the power to create waste facilities and who's in charge of what's accessible to people, and like, and then I did a lot of research this summer on the health impacts of pesticide use on migrant farm workers, and like that is like a whole other topic that was just like so atrocious and like so complicated, because it's not as simple as like don't use pesticides anymore, because it's like, well, once you've been using them, then this like plants are more susceptible, and like it just changes, and it's like it's a whole ecosystem, and like you can't change an ecosystem overnight, but like how do you change the way that things are grown? And then like with that, it's like then how do people tend to it, and then there's like less machinery, and it's like such
it's just like there's so many factors in these that it's like so hard to just say like we need to do this, but there's so many different places that we can plug in. Like there are so many different places that we can get involved, whether it's like on the farm, whether it's at the school cafeteria and like talking about food education, and like whether it's working in a food bank where like the food that's going to go bad is taken and then people can just eat it. Like there's so many different places to get involved, which is really cool.
Speaking of that,
And why is education about these things not valuable or not valued?
Capitalism.
Yeah, it's the whole like overarching system telling us, no, that we're not going to teach you that. We want you to keep spending your money, and yeah.
So like with all of these things, I don't know. It's like, so how do you change all the stuff? And for me, 9 times out of 10, I answer the question with awareness. Like a lot of people don't even know how pesticides are affecting farm work, and if they don't know, they can't care. So it's whether that's going in the school cafeteria and being like, hey, this is actually where your food's from, or like creating awareness, I think can make a really big first step.
And like not shaming everybody for their decisions.
One more, Nick.
Going off that, even within Whatcom County, the whole agriculture industry is one of the biggest polluters, and also one of the main reasons why our streams are struggling so much, which starts to tie into like whole other ecosystems, and there's so much. Okay, I'll stop.
So one of the main points I wanted people to pull out of this, and it seems like everyone did, and I'm sure you knew this before, but like this is so tied into our social infrastructure, our economic infrastructure, our educational infrastructure. It's everything, and it really is a problem of capitalism. So it's this really large thing, and I would like to touch on the fact that every day there are horrible, horrible injustices inflicted upon farm workers that make our food, and they're merely just trying to make a living for themselves. So if we can take 20 seconds to acknowledge that, I think that's really important. I do want to leave this with a note of hope, though, because I think there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in agriculture, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff happening socially through agriculture. We have a lot of urban agricultural starting. There's the Outback Farm and these places where people can come together and grow food in an ethical way, and learn about it. And we're all in an amazing position, and we have so much potential to change this by being environmental educators and taking a stand and saying very simple things, and educating people about this system, how it works, and how we can improve it. And the technology that I'm super, super excited about is farming in skyscrapers, because I think that's super cool. And there's a lot of other cool technology that can be implemented with organic farming and permaculture farms, and then really high-tech, highbrow stuff like towers. So there is somewhere to go, but we should be aware of what's happening right now. Yeah. Thank you guys, that was really awesome. I appreciate that.
Like I said before, this is kind of sick workshops with the Outback coming up soon.
I'll post a sheet on Canvas or the Google Doc of a bunch of organizations. Yeah.
We're an organization in Bellingham that is about farm worker justice, etc. And there are, and we already talked about the Birchwood Food Desert a little bit, but there are 2 rallies left. One is Thursday, April 26th at 5 p.m., and then one is May 3rd, Thursday at 5 p.m., so like the next 2 Thursdays at 5 p.m. And I can invite any of y'all who want to be added to the Facebook event, so I can post a link to it on Canvas or on the Facebook, and it's about rallying around that it's been 2 years since the Albertsons in the Birchwood neighborhood has been closed, and they're putting a fitness center in it instead. And so there's just no good way, and I think it's Claire lives near there, and like has also been, like there's just no good way to get any fresh food in the neighborhood, so I can add you to that.
Program in there, and instance with a farm worker that happened in the summer in Sumas County, and it was really hard because they got kicked off the farm and yelled at a bunch, and it was supposed to be like because I had to be like an unbiased source, but I tried to like really represent both sides, and yeah, give it a read.
You're a real journalist.